Welcome all the IEA members and others who have joined the webinar. This is in celebrating the International Internal Audit Awareness Month. Every year in the month of May, Institute of Internal Auditors all over the world, all the chapters used to celebrate the May month as the awareness month. In connection with that, we are having this awareness program in which our chapter president Manoj Kumar Jain will talk about IEA Global, IEA India, etc. And then Madam Uma Prakash, who is the Women's Circle chairperson, will also say a few words about what is all about Women's Circle and Women's Forum, etc. And then our main speaker on the technical subject, Madam Dolly Sureka, will be giving lecture presentation. She will be using PowerPoint presentation also. Now I request our chapter president, I will formally introduce him right now. Mr. T. Manoj Kumar Jain is managing partner of Yoganand and Ram Chartered Accountants. He is a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and Certified Information Systems Auditor CISA of ISACA USA, and is a diploma holder in IFRS from ACCA and also certified in forensic accounting and fraud detection conducted by ICAI. He is heading the audit practice and handling clients in banking, manufacturing, logistics, financial services, insurance, IT and ITES industries. He is instrumental in creating separate vertical for IS audit and IT consulting division in his firm. He specializes in internal auditing, internal financial control reviews and IS audit. He is active member of IAA and is currently the chapter president of Madras chapter and also Central Council member of IAA India. He is a life member of Bombay Chartered Accountant Society and Institute of Directors. He is a patron member of Jain's International Trade Organization. With this brief introduction, may I now request Mr. Manoj Kumar Jain to talk about IAA Global, IAA India and awareness program. Over to Manoj. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome one and all for this meeting. I will give a brief overview about IAA Global, IAA India, Madras chapter to all. May of every year is celebrated as an International Awareness Month for internal auditors across the globe. So just to give a brief overview of the global, IAA was formed in 1941 in Florida, USA, for promoting the profession of internal auditing throughout the world. It is the only professional body devoted to development and growth of IAA profession, including advocacy, education, training, and research. It has presence by way of chapters in more than 170 countries around the globe. It is offering its flagship certification called CA throughout the world, including India. There are 5 exam centers in India at Chennai, Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata, and Bangalore. Presently, due to COVID pandemic situation, they are allowing to take exams from home for all the candidates in India. The IAA Global also publishes bi-monthly journal called The Internal Auditor, which contains very useful and practical oriented articles on various subjects of interest to our IAA community throughout the world. Coming to India, there are overall 10 chapters and clubs in cities like Chennai, Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Vadodara, Bhilai, and Kochi. Recently, we added 2 more clubs in Ludhiana and Lucknow in the pipeline. There is an all-India body called IAA India for supervising and controlling these chapters and audit clubs in India. The IAA and its chapters and clubs organize a number of training programs all over India on useful topics for members and other auditing fraternity. Due to COVID, now all the webinars are for the last 2 months. The number of programs has been conducted through webinars for across the chapters. IA India also publishes a quarterly e-journal called Internal Audit Quarterly. It has a publications committee which publishes useful guidance books. Some of the titles are Role of IA in Internal Financial Controls Reporting and Fraud Detection using Data Analytics. IA India also conducts a number of webinars on contemporary subjects for members and others in the IA field. Coming to the Madras chapter was formed in the year 1977 and it's one of the very active chapters of IAA. Its annual conferences are unique in nature with 3 parallel tracks of technical sessions for 2 days. It draws large number of IA professionals from all across the southern states and also northern India. It conducts webinar on useful topics of contemporary nature. It also conducts training programs joining hands with bodies such as ISACA, MMA, ICAA, Indian Audit and Accounts Department, ACCA, etc. Every year in the month of May, IAA is celebrating International Audit Awareness Month, and this program is part of that. So I welcome one and all for the learning. All the best. Okay, sir, you can take over.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Manoj Kumar, for the elaborate note on the IAA Global, IAA India, and about the Awareness Month celebration. And now, before I request Madam Uma Prakash, because she will join a bit later because of some preoccupation. Now I request our main speaker of the subject to start her presentation. I will formally introduce her. Madam Dolly Sureka is the Vice President of Assurance and Business Advisory at Swiggy. She has 17 years experience in internal auditing, business advisory functions across industry domains, and strategy execution, development of fraud prevention and detection, leveraging analytics, machine learning models, currently leading the effort to create the North Star Assurance and Business Advisory function at Swiggy, which is India's most versatile and agile food delivery startup. She provides in Swiggy independent assurance on controls, compliance, and risk management practices to investors and leadership. She drives process excellence initiatives with a view to enhance efficiency and drive the trust and safety charter. Earlier, she was with Wipro Enterprises. There, she was responsible for incubating internal audit function and managing the same across 16 plus countries. She has significantly increased business orientation in audit engagements to unlock business value in addition to ensuring management assurance. She has championed implementation of structured risk-based audit methodologies and credited with developing a program to deliver right the first time. Prior to Wipro, she was with Ernst & Young for about 6+ years. With this brief introduction, may I now request Madam Dolly Sureka to make the presentation. The subject, the title is Business Continuity in the COVID-19 Environment and the Internal Auditor's Role in Supporting Business Continuity. Over to Madam.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Vidyadharan. Thanks, Manoj. A Saturday afternoon and a post-lunch session, and it's also a webinar. So we will try to keep, it engaging and not seem to be more like a monologue. Good afternoon, friends, once again, and hope all of you are doing safe and all of you are doing healthy. The topic for our discussion today is business continuity amidst COVID-19 and role of internal audit. So just one quick check, Mr. Chanchal, is my screen visible? So for team, I think COVID-19 has posed, it's a scenario where it's emerged from a health crisis to more of an economic crisis, something which was limited to a local province in Wuhan, moved and across the globe and took the shape and form of a pandemic. How is this pandemic really impacting all of us? It's impacting the macroeconomy as a whole. It's impacting countries and across the globe. So if we see in terms of what are the key major macro indicators, largely almost 200 countries have been influenced by COVID-19. Global unemployment is at its peak. World trade has got impacted, and 1/3 of the world's population is typically still under lockdown. With all of these macro indicators, what has also happened is industries, all of this is a function of how industries have been influenced. So typically you would find that across the globe, there are a good set of industries severely impacted, some moderate, medium to long-term impact, and some, some could be gaining out of this scenario as well. If largely the major cuts that we see, or the in terms of industry, we find the travel and the hospitality sector has been significantly badly impacted, because people are cutting down on travels, people are cutting down, organizations are cutting down on travel and looking at remote working and virtual connects, etc. Energy and utilities would get impacted because mobility is at its peak, lowest peak perhaps. Life sciences and pharma would be positive gainers, and health sector would be a positive gainer out of this. Retail would perhaps medium, there would be pockets in terms of saying, like, essential items would perhaps see an uptick. But if you look at, in terms of, cinemas, restaurants and all of them, they would be, they would definitely see a downturn there. So all of the entire scenario, it has actually resulted in the world looking at a new normal, as they call it, and different ways in terms of how consumers would actually, it would result in a significant change in their behavior, their preferences, and how they kind of think and react. So the way I've kind of segmented my discussion is, into two parts. One, in terms of saying how is business combating COVID-19, and how would consumer preferences shape business models. And the second is in terms of saying how would internal auditors, because this are those challenging times where internal audit would play a significant role in contributing to the organizations. So how can internal audit perhaps support and drive some of the key agendas, in addition to the key roles around assurance which they typically play. Now, if we look at the consumer behavior, the three things which are clearly emerging is, one is consumer spending is significantly impacted. When you talk about spending, people are either, staying away or deferring their discretionary spends. People are wanting to save more, so they are kind of moving into a cash preservation mode. And there is a significant focus on health, hygiene, sanitation, and fitness-related products versus, in terms of luxury goods and investment in real estates, etc. And all of this comes with the other aspect of saying, customers are now moving more towards technology-aided products. So we would see a significant shift in consumer behavior, where people will move from brick and mortar or offline sales into online. And here, that's what we see, purchases move across the globe. People have moved into digital instruments, using digital instruments, moving to online platforms. And a lot of us would have seen in the COVID times, where we found that, companies like Big Basket, Grofers, they were almost running, X% higher than their volumes, and they were unable to suffice or fulfill orders. Their fulfillment was severely delayed because of supply, because of labor, as well as, the high demand spikes that we saw. So going back to, so with this consumer behavior, what is really happening is organizations have to respond differently because consumer requirements would be different. So from a change perspective, it is forcing organizations to be more agile, nimble, and the macroeconomic environment is definitely forcing us to be more resilient. So moving on to the next, the next topic in terms of saying how are organizations really combating the virus. As I mentioned, there are the few integral elements which organizations and the people working for the organizations are enforcing is about being resilient, being agile, nimble, and innovative, right? So if we look at this, if we look at the overall scheme of things, every aspect of an organization, whether it is strategy, finance, supply chain, operations, or product, all of them have in the short to medium term, are looking at ways and means to stay afloat, to kind of preserve cash, and to looking inwards to be to be profitable in the manner they could possibly be the best possible way of being profitable at this point of time. And to give you a perspective, I think there are a lot of material content, and even if we speak to industry experts, while we may have been under say 55 days of lockdown, but I think the impact that it has made, not just on the Indian economy, but globally, countries and economy would take significant amount of time even to get back to their original normal in terms of the pre-COVID era. So just to give you a perspective, how are organizations meeting or working through some of these aspects, and where, in a time where the basic going concern assumption is being questioned, in a time where business continuity is being questioned, how are organizations working differently to manage some of these? So I'll kind of take a pause here. And Mr. Chanchal, is everything fine? Am I clear?
That's right.
Okay. So if we look at the aspect around strategy, right? What really changed once COVID once people were talking about lockdown and we had the Janata curfew in India? I think organizations kind of moved at war footing, and they set up crisis management teams which were set of diverse team, and with multiple cross-functional skill sets, so that different perspectives could be brought on board, and they formed a task force to meet the immediate needs of the day, of the business. So organizations moved from a strategy which is more planned in a periodic manner, where we would say we're talking about a quarterly plan versus a daily planning activity. So business risk assessment and business impact was being ascertained on a daily basis. Organizations were kind of looking at in terms of pausing, reviving, and taking various actions based on various government interpretations that were kind of coming out on a day basis. So from a strategy perspective, there has been a sea change in the way people have been looking or in the way organizations were looking at their systems, their processes, and the response time. I think there's a fundamental change there. Now, if you talk about finance and legal, how have these functions really, dealt with or kind of worked through, or what are the key change aspects that they would have looked at during the COVID times? I think fundamentally one of the key things was, investment prioritization, revisiting the budgets, the forecast, assessing liquidity, where companies have a global footprint. You would perhaps go back and figure out in terms of your risk with respect to currency fluctuations, where you have investments in terms of how your investments were kind of looking like short to medium term. And from a business standpoint, definitely they were revisiting the profitability at a business unit level to figure out how the capital allocation should really work. So this is more from a macro finance perspective, and from a legal standpoint, I think one of the key things that we read about was enforcement of the force majeure clause, where across sectors people have gone back and figured out figured out ways to enforce this and drive in some kind of drive in some kind of arrangement with the contractor in terms of figuring out a win-win situation for both of them. The third bit around talent and organization, if you see, it's about one of the key things which emerged from the COVID-19 was, while people were locked down, it was very important that there was a lot of communication of what was really happening within the organization. So it was a need of empathetic leadership, communication and over communication, and across orgs we would find people, there were leadership notes or memos being sent out to the employees to ensure that the stakeholder confidence, whether it is in terms of employees or even it is in terms of investors or board, there were periodic updates to ensure that the stakeholder confidence was remaining intact. They also ramped up their efforts to provide work from home facility, etc. Now, if we look at the from a business standpoint, whether it is supply chain, whether it is operations or customers, these would have been very differently impacted based on the specific sectors into which the business relates. Now, talking about our sector, or I'll talk about specifics around, say, what we did at Swiggy was on the operations. We have around 200,000 delivery partners who are out on the fleet, and as the Prime Minister put it, they were they were our Corona warriors who were actually putting their life at stake and still delivering food to people in the need of the hour. So it was from an organization perspective, it was very important that we kind of did what we could do the best, and there were multiple initiatives around that in terms of saying, how do we protect the minimum earnings for our delivery partners, how do we keep them safe, and how do we provide them the right kind of hygienic guide them around the hygienic standards, etc. So there were initiatives to kind of seek medical insurance for them, COVID insurance. We kind of to secure the minimum earnings, we introduced a facility called de-tipping. People who order on Swiggy would have known that, right? And we also tried to we kind of created a campaign around fund which would help our delivery partners. More so, there were also training programs, no nuggets, in a world of social distancing and a zero touch in terms of saying there's no people involvement. There were training modules which were created, and they were being sent as a push notification to the delivery partners, where they could go through the training programs in a virtual environment, and they could understand the safe and hygienic standards which need to be executed on the ground. I'll kind of also take you through one of the key initiatives that Swiggy did in terms of saying, how do we actually kind of move into using a technology first and an AI first mindset around how we kind of used the AI, leveraged AI for delivering, to ensure and better, safe hygienic standards being enforced by the delivery partners. The other important thing which the scenario which COVID-19 forced us as across people and across the organization was in terms of innovation, right? So if we talk about product innovation and service innovation, we would find multiple organizations did various initiatives around, like, say, we heard organizations moving and launching sanitizers. Some started the manufacturing of ventilators, and that's where the agility comes in, where organizations were going out thinking of different revenue streams that they could look at, and and by this, maximize the revenue that they could possibly have, and more so continue and contribute to the society in the right and meaningful manner. So it was very important that that the companies were in alignment with whatever is the consumer need, and they were moving in a manner that it is more tech oriented, and hence moving to a contactless world that we call versus a hand-to-hand exchange of things. The other important thing that none of us can possibly miss is the use of technology infrastructure. Organizations did, the way they ramped up the availability of IT infra to support working from home was something which was phenomenal. And with all of this, it was also in terms of getting the right number of laptops, providing people with data cards, etc. While they seem very, very petty for us, but looking at and fulfilling this at a large scale was something which they and doing it at a speed which was phenomenal, because the people's productivity would have got impacted, etc. Is something that with so much of speed, there is at times it also kind of results in dilution of controls. So while all of this has happened, there are definitely pockets of improvement, and that is where I would kind of bring this up again in terms of saying how internal auditors could perhaps look at some of these aspects and contribute to the organization by looking at a role which is broader than assurance alone. So moving on from there, I think just to kind of touch upon the key highlights which the scenario opened up for all of us was empathetic leadership. A zero baselining approach, because it was forcing organizations to look inward and see what could possibly be done differently. Developing a resilient framework with respect to contingency planning and risk management. In fact, one of the key things which is often getting debated is what if there is an outbreak again, how would we respond to that, and are really geared and prepared to kind of combat that. The other key important aspect is in terms of saying how do we look at innovation and how do we really adapt to the new normal. I would perhaps take a pause here, and Mr. Chanchal, if there are any questions, happy to address that.
Yeah, someone is asking, is copy of presentation would be made available?
Sorry, I would not be able to share this, but yes, I mean, we can talk about it right now here, but I wouldn't be able to share the presentation, please.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay. The next thing I would perhaps kind of just walk you through an aspect where we're talking about hygiene and safety standards, right? Because if you see how are the consumers and what is it that is largely impacting consumers today, it is one of the key fears in the mind of people is, are they and their family, near and dear ones, really safe and sound? In fact, there was a survey, a consumer pulse survey done in post-COVID in March 2020, and that talks about saying that almost 86% of their Indians are really worried about health and safety. What else is really important in this world, right? In terms of today, what is it that would really impact the consumer significantly? We want to feel safe, and we want to keep ourselves safe, and we also want to practice social distancing in a world where we would want that would help others to be even moving safely around. So just to give you a perspective, I'll share an example, which is more of a case study. I was not say case study, an example actually, which in terms of saying how Swiggy, the product and the data sciences team kind of work together to build and leverage artificial intelligence in fostering and in kind of setting up some of the measuring, health and compliance standards, and also in terms of ensuring that it was not getting compromised at any level. Now, typically, if you see for us at Swiggy, when we look at an order journey, there is a customer places an order, the order is relayed to the restaurant prepares the food, and then a delivery partner is assigned to the order. The delivery partner picks up the order, and then he's on his way to kind of deliver the order back to the consumer at the doorstep. Now, how were we really fostering consumer confidence across these legs of the journey, of the customer order journey? One, when we kind of browse through the application, right, there were best safety standards which were shared with the restaurant partners, and the restaurant partners who were abiding by that were being declared separately or were being flagged off separately on the app, which would actually give the consumer a confidence of the hygienic standards being practiced by them. There were videos and there were GIFs which were being sent out, the push notifications that I talked about, that was being sent out to the delivery partners to ensure that to ensure that they practice the right kind of hygiene and safety standards. It was being done virtually. There were no nuggets which were being sent, etc. And so that's where you created overall I would say understanding of the significance of practicing safety and hygiene standard. Now, what was also happening is once an order is relayed to the restaurant and the delivery partner gets assigned to the order, now if he goes and if he reaches significantly before the food is ready, it may result in overcrowding at the restaurant, and it also poses the delivery partner at a risk, right? Because because the more he interacts with external people, and we would want him to be in an environment which is fairly with a safe area of social distancing being maintained, etc. So there were deep learning machine algorithms that were designed in a manner that that he reaches at the right time, which we typically call in the just in time. And how was this derived? So when the food at a restaurant is being prepared, there's a predicted wait time for every dish, predicted time being taken to prepare the food, and then there is a predicted time by which the delivery partner would reach the particular restaurant. Now, between these two, basis a deep algorithm method, the optimal the optimal predicted time was identified, and basis that the delivery partner was assigned to the order. So this would ensure that there is social distancing is maintained, and there is no overcrowding, etc. Further, it also helped us to ensure that the delivery partner time was being optimally utilized, and it actually helped us in reducing 25% of the wait time. The third bit was again in terms of once the delivery partner reaches the customer location, how do we really ensure that the food was getting delivered to the customer, but at the same time there was no exchange of no physical handshakes really happening. So that's where we migrated into this concept of contactless, where when a customer places the order, he could opt for a contactless delivery, and the food could be left at his doorstep. And this would go in as a notification to the delivery executive. Once the executive reaches the customer doorstep, he would leave the package there, and he would upload an image in the app that would help us register that the order was actually delivered. In addition to this, we also moved into a mechanism where we said, how do we avoid exchange? And hence it is important that we kind of do not have cash exchanges, and hence we kind of moved out of COD, which is typically cash on delivery, and nudging customers to move on to a prepaid model. Any questions here?
We have some questions.
Sure.
Yeah, just okay. Many of the organizations, including Swiggy, trimmed down the staff to arrest increase in the operational cost.
Yes, so yes, that's right. At Swiggy, we also did go through the project, and there were people being laid off. But I think, as you may have read from press releases, etc., that's one of the saddest moments in the history at Swiggy, at least, because this was not something that was envisaged. Yes, what the scenario has definitely resulted in, it is forcing organizations to think inward and to remove any kind of flag that we have across. And it is not just about Swiggy. You would have read multiple other organizations which have either laid off or are asking leaders to kind of take significant pay cuts, or forcing, or I mean indirectly kind of asking people or requesting employees to move on to garden leave, etc. These are those tough times, yes, but it is also forcing us to think that we should be we should be moving in a manner which is more technology driven.
Chirag is asking, can you please share a template to perform stress testing in COVID times?
I'm sure there are a lot of templates available, Chirag, across multiple websites. And if you still need any offline support, feel free to, maybe you can connect with Mr. Vidyadharan, and I will be happy to share any further thoughts on that.
What exactly did Swiggy do to keep employees engaged in fun? Vinay is asking.
What I would like to say to the audience is that any queries of any nature or any assistance is required, you can email to the chapter or to me, kvdharan@gmail.com, or IAA Madras 2014@gmail.com. And then wherever required, we will get in touch with the speaker, Dolly Sureka, and then give you the answer back to you. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of, if you're asking, if your question is in terms of how did we keep people engaged, I think there are two aspects to it, right? One is communicate and over communicate. So across the organization, there were multiple communication in terms of what the leadership vision was, how were we moving on a day-to-day basis, what were the key milestones that business was achieving, and how were we dealing with business challenges, etc. So with that communication, we were really aware as an organization of what was happening, and hence people could chip in at the right point of time across multiple streams. So that's one. Second is in terms of, these were those stress times where people were working remotely, and, from an India standpoint, you did not have a lot of people, right? I mean, if you look at migrant employees, they were stuck at some places they were still struggling to get back to their hometowns, they were students, etc. So I think the way I look at it, they were working, under stress scenarios, in terms of saying they were throughout the day, they were on calls, and then you kind of order something, and then you're not sure whether you would fall, whether you were not comfortable because you were, half of your colleagues might have migrated back to their hometown, etc. So in those stress times, I think what is also very important was how do you keep team engagements on? So there were multiple water break cooler sessions happening, video engagements, video chats happening that organizations kind of moved on to ensure that the face-to-face connect was maintained. Even from an HR standpoint, there were wellness programs which were being designed by employees. There were learning sessions which were being done so that people could kind of continually even kind of skill themselves, or when they were looking for a change, you can perhaps attend some of those sessions. You can look at there were doctors on call and multiple other stuff that was done to kind of keep the employee engagement levels at a peak. So I think for us, we designed a program like Wellness Around You, which was a program for employees. And I think all of this put together really kept our motivation levels at its peak. And I think Swiggy this was one of the essential items, and our organization was still up and running, and teams were working on multiple priorities, because this was a time when we also kind of scaled up our grocery service line around grocery and Swiggy Genie, etc. So yes, all of this really was a kicker for the entire for the employees across the org. So now we move on to the section of opportunities and what is it that the scenario has created for us, right? So looking opportunities amongst challenges should be our role. To me, the way I look at the internal audit function is we should not only be assurance providers, but we should work as business partners as well as fraud risk managers, and hence this scenario actually will widen our horizon in terms of what we can do. And the fact that organizations have moved with such speed and agility, there is a possibility of some dilution of controls or internal controls being weak at certain points in time, and hence it is important for us to kind of fix this immediately as we kind of scale subsequently. So the way I look at it is, three ways, as I mentioned: the business partner, assurance partner, and fraud risk manager. As a business partner, from a focus standpoint, if I look at an org, the org would be typically focused on revenue and growth. So when I say revenue, I'm talking about profitability and revenue. So hence it's EBITDA and growth in terms of saying how do I look at organic and inorganic growth. Now, from an EBITDA standpoint, the three key pillars would be how do we optimize revenue, how do we reduce or optimize on the CORG, how do we limit our SG&A. So as auditors, we should look at the revenue streams. We should identify opportunities, assess revenue leakages, revisit the contracts in terms of whatever new contract could have been possibly signed, or revisit even long-term contracts to assess if they could possibly have an impact from a revenue recognition standpoint even in the future. From a COG standpoint, it is important that we look at balancing. So what I'll do is I'll perhaps take you through this more in context of how we are looking at it in Swiggy, and then maybe if you have specific questions around what could be done as a business partner for your specific orgs, you can share those questions and I'll try to answer them. So for us, from a COG standpoint, it's important that while we optimize on the cost, we also optimize on consumer, on experience. And this experience comes in from the consumers, the delivery partners, and restaurants. So if you look at the Swiggy model, it's fairly triangulated, where there is customer at one end who places the order, and then there's restaurant who kind of prepares the order, and the delivery partner who picks and delivers back to the customer. So it's more like a triangle, and hence it's important that we balance cost and also ensure that all these three key points of intersection, the experience is also fairly well balanced. How do we do that? There are opportunities for us in terms of automation. We are looking at self-serve models. We're looking at zero-touch models. When you talk about self-serve, what does it really mean? So can we actually move into an area where a delivery partner can go through self-onboard himself? So how do we kind of make it contactless? How do we make the onboarding process contactless and hence zero-touch? And how do we make it ensure that the process is seamless and happens with a minimal TAT? So this is something I think all of us would have heard, right? Recruitment, where organizations in the COVID times have also recruited people, and the entire onboarding was kind of done virtually. So one is virtual, and second would be the next step in terms of saying how do I really make it a self-serve. So automation, I think, would be a key theme, and that would be, in my mind, a theme across organizations, and maybe for the next, for the few years to come. Automation, rationalization, also in terms of identifying quick win opportunities. How do I kind of remove what is the immediate flab, or that we can kind of chisel down and look for some quick in-year realizations. And at the same time, how do we make sure that the voice of the customer, of the restaurant, or the delivery partner is kind of heard, and the processes or the policies that are designed, they are more realistic, and hence the need for doing surveys, the need for the engagement, when we talk about audit, we talk about saying field visits. So these are some of those field visits or surveys. How do I integrate that and stitch that back into the process and policy to make it more robust at the upstream level itself? So this would definitely be this is definitely an area for us where we are looking at saying how do we partner with business and help them achieve in some of these business objectives. From a growth standpoint, how do we look at the key levers in the existing growth model? So effectively, all organizations and industries have got impacted, some positively, some significantly negatively, and some mid to in a medium negative perspective. So for us, what would be important is at least what we are, at least the industry reports and the experts' view that we kind of hear is it would at least take around 9 to 12 months, maybe March 2021, by which by when industries would start seeing or getting back to their pre-COVID levels. So in this scenario, it is important that we look at how do we protect the brand. So in terms of saying brand protection would come in terms of how do we also how are we making sure that the customer engagement is maintained. So looking at the design and the operating effectiveness of multiple products which have been rolled and they have touch points across the customer, delivery partner, restaurant partners, I think that would be one key theme. So fulfillment of social responsibility, one of the key theme, one of the things that we've seen during the COVID times is companies coming out differently and contributing back to the society. So wherever these funds were being created, wherever these contributions have been made, it is important that somebody does an independent audit to ensure that whatever was meant for social responsibility or the purpose, it is actually discharged in the right way. And with this, in these COVID times, what is also happening is, like, say, for example, in grocery, you would see a lot, the grocers are under pressure, the retailers could be under pressure because supply is not available and there's a shortage. There is a possibility of counterfeit risk being high. And hence, how do we really manage the risk of counterfeit, which is largely in, your FMCG companies, etc. This would be a fairly large, I think this risk would kind of, rating would kind of move up the ladder as we kind of see it in the post-COVID times. And from a new business standpoint, what typically internal audit does is, we have a plan in terms of saying this is our annual plan or half-yearly plan. I think now the approach would be to say, hey, kind of, can you actually look at proactive audits for a new business stream or a revenue stream that we've created? How can internal auditors kind of look at it upfront and identify risk gaps or control gaps and help plug them immediately rather than doing it at a later point of time? And this would actually help us ensure that we don't leak the tap, till we kind of come and do an audit. So any questions on this? Mr. Chanchal, are you back?
Yes, ma'am. There is electricity problem in my home. So, yeah. So I'm sorry for that. And some questions there. Nirav is asking what corrective and preventive action were considered during the downtime during initial announcement of lockdown to mitigate losses and risks.
So see, I think as I mentioned to you earlier, right, when we talk about planning, business planning, it is and strategy, the entire the approach that was changed. The organization that at least at Swiggy we moved from, we had a task force and there were daily leadership reviews happening in terms of saying what is the real on ground challenge and how is business managing that. So with that in place, definitely those corrective and preventive actions were being taken. Now, as an internal auditor, I don't think we would have been, you can actually, as an internal auditor, our contribution would lie in terms of being part of the task force and highlighting any critical risk perspectives which were being missed. And that's where I said that, a cognitive diversity in such kind of, or a multi-function group really kind of brings that perspective. And that's why these task force were set of people from all the possible functions who were kind of managing it and kind of channelizing things on the ground. So that would definitely help us to I wouldn't say that curtail the loss, but it would curtail the loss, but it cannot be saying that, can I negate my loss or can I ensure that there's no loss? If the business volumes are not there, you will definitely not have those many orders per day. And to that extent, the revenues were down means it was down. But yes, what we could definitely do was that we could curtail it and in a manner which was best possible at that moment.
Some more questions, ma'am. Can we take?
Yeah, sure.
Anil Bansal is asking, can you please provide the few examples of revenue leakages verified by you?
Okay, so typically, so there. So let me give you one example, and I would not say it's at Swiggy or what it is, but I'll give you a perspective of revenue leakages. So like say for example, if I have a commission which is a commission rate of X, which is agreed upon in an agreement, but what happens is, and it is a tiered commission structure. So there is a rate A which I pay you from Jan to March, a rate B which I pay you in April, May, and June, and a rate C which goes on to July, August, September, etc. So wherever it is staggered, it was updated in a system. We found, or the team noted that it was not getting updated because there were two independent systems, and it was not kind of an interface based control, and hence there was delay in updation of the commission rates or of the actual commission rate, resulting in revenue leakages. So that is one example. The other that we've seen, and people would talk about in, say, in IT industries, is in terms of saying, your TNM, which is your billing rates versus actual revenue billed, right? I think that's one area which is always kind of an opportunity in any IT company. And also in terms of deployment, people typically, if you look at saying what is it that was agreed upon in terms of skill set, in terms of rate, the people, the charge out rates at a skill set and at an experience level versus the actual deployment, I think those are areas that you can look at. From an FMCG standpoint, I think your sales cutoff procedures, your pricing in terms of saying, what was the price at which the product was actually launched versus at which it was being sold, the discounts, promotion offers. I think all of that will give you a perspective and identify leakages from a revenue standpoint.
Yeah, ma'am. Some more questions.
Sure.
Yeah. Mr. Satish is asking, what is the audit process of handling customer feedback?
Okay, so we have a call center team. I mean, if you're talking about at Swiggy, there is a call center team, and there are various agents, there are supervisors, etc. Your feedback is kind of recorded there, and that is reviewed. So basically, there is a review mechanism. So the feedback could be because of multiple issues. It could be because of a food issue. It could be because of a non-food issue. It could be because of a behavioral issue of the delivery partner. It could be for anything else, right? So all of this is kind of recorded, and I mean, once you kind of raise a complaint or you submit a feedback, that is kind of registered, and those are reviewed by the right SPOCs within the organization, and necessary action is taken, and it forms part of our team reviews and other CXO reviews as well.
What were the additional process controls introduced during COVID period? Mr. Satish KG is asking.
So my answer to that would be, when you talk about additional controls being introduced, so say for example, if I'm looking at moving into grocery, I need to ensure what is the kind of what is the kind of system or processes that I would have with respect to a customer gratification, with respect to a cancellation, and hence the process and the policy, all of that needs to be orchestrated in the right manner. So when I talk about controls and this thing, so these were the kind of controls which the business business had implemented, and business being the first line of defense and the operating controls, I think our role of internal audit could be in terms of proactively working with the business and helping them define these controls. That's one example. The second example is where we moved on to even delivery of liquor. You would have heard like Zomato and Swiggy moving on to it, and we are kind of present in a few cities. So I think there the check was in terms of saying how do we, the control points that again the business being the first line of defense designed is into say how do we ensure that the customer is of the right age, what is the kind of customer information that is required, etc. And that's where finance or your risk managers could play a role in terms of saying in shaping. So effectively my take here would be in terms of saying how can audit actually where the risk had and work with the business partners to help define the process and control at the design stage itself. Now, one of the questions which kind of comes up is, isn't this conflict of interest? Wouldn't the objective get diluted? I think the way I would look at it is two parts. One, I think organizations have moved on from the traditional thing, and what I really believe is that if there's a team which is kind of working in supporting the business on this, there is another team member or another B team which could actually still be looking at it from an audit standpoint and commenting on this. So if it is the same person who is doing it, perhaps could be a dilution. But if there are different people, even if it is within the same team, I don't see that as a dilution. And that's where you will find that many organizations are right now moving or embracing internal audit along with risk management as one single function. Maybe we can take one more question, Mr. Chanchal.
Sure, ma'am. Please let us know areas can be taken up by internal auditors post COVID-19.
Okay, so I think this slide kind of covers it. I hope it has given you a perspective in terms of what are the areas that you could look at in terms of your revenue, in terms of expenditure, and maybe I'll kind of then move to the next one. So as an assurance partner, what is it that we can do? So you can look at areas with respect to IT, finance controllership, and talent management. So Mr. Chanchal, what I'll do is I'll kind of run the team, the group through the slide, and then maybe we will take more questions later.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So as an assurance, so we spoke about a business partner, and now we move into the domain of an audit or an assurance partner. The other role that we kind of had is how do we strengthen the governance and the compliance posture, and how do we contribute in shaping that? So to me, three things would be very important. One is in terms of IT, the second being finance, controllership, legal, and the third is talent management. These are typically your three horizontals which will flow across the organization. From an IT standpoint, during the COVID times, organizations have worked, day in, day out to kind of ramp up the infra capability to make sure that, laptops or additional whatever infra is needed was provided, etc. And hence there are possible opportunities around security dilution. So security guardrails is something which is of key, how do we kind of look at that aspect? I think that's one key area to look at. Second is, how while organizations have enabled work from home facility, I think access governance, right? Access controls would be very important. That's an area of review. Again, ITGC will be an area of review. The third thing is, I'm not sure if you're aware, but, across organizations, we are seeing multiple increase in cyber attacks. So a vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, those are other opportunities which the IA could look at, and in terms of giving an assurance on the control, on the operating effectiveness of some of these controls. Around finance and controllership, again, when we look at the fraud triangle, typically we say that attitude, incentive, and pressure. Organizations will be under tremendous pressure because volumes are hit. They are perhaps at they are facing a big economic downturn, etc. And in these times, there is a possibility of maybe looking the other way when you're looking at profitability and all of it. So it's important that review of financial controls. The key when you look at ICOFR, which is internal controls and financial reporting, some of debtors confirmation, creditors confirmation, some of this becomes really very important. So your financial statement close process, your FSCP is key, along with asset liability, JV testing. Those to me would, and cash and bank reconciliations, I think those would really gain precedence from a review standpoint. For listed entities, I think insider trading and third-party risk management is something which would again find a key placeholder from a prioritization perspective. And procurement is another area which to my mind would again gain precedence. The reason being, while we have enabled a lot of this, right? So suppose we kind of organizations would have enabled sanitization equipments to their fleet. So we kind of Swiggy distributed gloves, sanitizers, etc. We would have onboarded multiple vendors. It is not just about sanitization, but across multiple work streams, wherever we, in order to tractions and get speed, we could have done multiple things. And similarly, organizations would have worked with multiple subcontractors, suppliers. For sanitizers, organization may have entered into third-party arrangements, etc. So it is possible that some of the control points are getting missed, and hence the entire risk management from an identification, empanelment, and agreement, and your price parity and offboarding, all of this will become really critical. From a talent standpoint, employee well-being would continue to be a significant placeholder. How are organizations managing work from home? I'm sure we would see new ways of, HR teams are coming up with new ways of measuring productivity, stress management, employee well-being, and all of it. So not at immediate time, but yes, maybe 6 months down the line, I think this would be an area for review to understand, because while many of us are still working from home, the question is, how do you really measure your team's productivity? How do you measure your productivity, etc.? So there are new techniques which would kind of come in, and hence a need for kind of review and revisiting all of that over a period of time. The next slide, I would kind of just draw your attention in terms of saying, what is it that we should look at from a fraud risk standpoint? So as I mentioned to you earlier, financial statement fraud, if you go back to history, we've seen multiple frauds which were actually identified. And typically the identification has happened mostly after a crisis event. So we'll have to wait and watch in terms of saying what gets identified next. But financial statement fraud, while from a statistics standpoint, I think there's a recent ACFE report which talks about saying, while it's only at least 10% of the occupational frauds pertain to this category, while it is only 10%, but I think the median loss in terms of fraud is significantly high. So financial statement fraud will be one of the key themes, and hence review of anti-fraud controls in this area should be a key area of review. Technology and data related fraud. As I mentioned to you, cyber attacks have increased significantly. Just to talk about it and give you some examples, we are seeing multiple, we are seeing organizations sharing instances of saying, account takeover happening. So typically what happens is because we are at home, we are phishing and, kind of moving all to multiple sites, there is a possibility of credentials being read and being misused by the hackers, and they might be taking over your accounts, etc., or using those credentials elsewhere. So there's a significant increase in account takeover fraud, bot attacks. Clickbait is typically in terms of saying, where organizations are investing in digital media or spend, how do we deploy bots to kind of continuously click on that, and hence increase your cost per click, and which is actually a loss to the company. So technology and data related fraud for all tech companies and for companies like us would be definitely one area to kind of look at and make sure that there are wastages around this area are minimal. The other bit that we can talk about is, again, supply chain. As I mentioned to you, the vendor due diligence will again become very important, and how the entire process of identification and even the payment terms, the rates, etc., would be key in this. How are organizations managing it? 3-4 things come in kind of very critical. One, the overall tone. Secondly, my sense is we would see an increased hotline and reporting coming in through the ombuds or whistleblowing mechanism that organizations may have. The third thing is many organizations are now moving into a review by exception approach rather than saying, a population review. So can we really, as auditors, internal auditors, design continuous control monitoring techniques or create dashboards, etc., which just highlight the red flags, and hence that would actually become critical for us to monitor outliers and then take necessary action. So these three, and most importantly, technological preparedness, because if we are not resilient, our IT systems are not resilient to phishing attacks, bot attacks, then there's definitely a lot to lose. So with all of this, with all of these guardrails being in place, definitely there's something, the risk is possibly managed. Thanks for your time, and it was nice kind of sharing my thoughts with you.